Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we've got Dr. Bill with us. He is the author of Watch Me Die. Watch Me Die is a unique book about executions and what that whole process is like. I believe that he's probably one of the few people that could have written this book. Dr. Bill has witnessed several executions, and he's also got a reputation now with death row inmates as being someone that they can talk to. And he's been requested multiple times to attend people's deaths. Dr. Bill, welcome to the stage.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be on here. In fact, I was excited to be on your show, so thank you.
Dr. Bill, this has to be one of the most unique books. Uh, it's very interesting, including the artwork, which we'll talk about later. Can we first start off with how do you get into this subject?
So, it's a great question, one that I get asked all the time. And, people still scratch their heads when I give them the honest answer. So, it occurred purely by, I don't want to say accident, but happenstance. I received my doctorate in psychology, and I was teaching at the university in Ohio. And I always said that I would never be one of those professors that would teach book smarts only. And uh, in teaching a lot of the same upper level classes, social psychology, abnormal psychology, human growth and development, things of that nature, we still have the same debatable topics today in 2025 that we did back in 2005, which is legalization of drugs, gun laws, abortion rights, and of course, capital punishment. I've been fortunate enough to go to different countries over the years. I love to travel, so I knew a lot about the different drug laws. I grew up hunting all my life. I don't know how many guns I even owned, so I knew a lot about the laws and guns. I had the unfortunate experience of being able to counsel females that had gone through abortions and been in abortion clinics. But when it came to capital punishment and death row, I didn't know a lot about that. So I started researching on it, and I found out that most of the researchers were just writing on research that they had read over the years because of the lack of transparency. People just don't take field trips to death row, and certainly not to the death house. So, one of my best friends, who's a common pleas court judge in the state of Ohio, he said, here's the number to the attorney general's office. Give her a call, tell her what you need, and see if they can't help you out. So I called. I said, listen, I need to get on death row. I don't know if you put a lottery in for people with executions. I don't know anything about it, but put me down for it. And they hung up on me. I thought, well, that was pretty rude. I actually like to think that they just got disconnected, but I'm sure they hung up on me. So I called back and I said, I explained myself a little bit more professionally. And the receptionist was very, very nice. And she said, listen, I don't get this question asked a lot at all. And she said, but the Ohio Revised Code allows certain people to be on death row, and only three people are allowed to witness an execution at any one time on the inmate side. So, but I'm going to send you the Ohio Revised Code as well as the list of people that are scheduled to die in Ohio over the next 2 years. If you can find any loopholes, have at it. So she sent me the information. I found a couple loopholes that would, I think, get me into death row at the time, which was just moved from Lucasville, Ohio, to Mancy, Ohio, where Shawshank Redemption. Everybody knows where that prison's at. So it was right next to it, and I got my undergrad at Ashland, which was like 30 minutes from there. So I knew I'd been to the prison before. So I'd called the warden. He invited me down. I went on to death row that time. Saw a few people just as I'm walking around and getting to know what it looks like, and I thought, well, maybe I'll do this once or twice more just so I can learn firsthand, so I can teach my students. And a guy just happened to be there and said, hey, I'm going to be executed pretty soon. You want to watch me die? Hence the title for the book. And I said, yeah, sure. So that started this journey down a rabbit hole, I would say, where I started going to death row in Mansfield since it was only an hour from where I lived, maybe 45 minutes, so I could go a lot, and I got to know some of the guys down there, and next thing I know, this execution is scheduled, and I'm present for it, and it just mushroomed from there, from only Ohio's death row, then to all over the country, but mostly on Ohio, because when I witnessed the first execution, other inmates reached out to me then, because there's no transparency at all. I think I'm still the only person to ever own the actual death row protocol that a different judge had subpoenaed from the high court. And since he subpoenaed it, he considered it public record. He gave it to me for my research. I still have it. And the other inmates started reaching out to me, and then it just, like I said, mushroomed from there to where now, 20 years later, I still have another execution to attend this year yet in Arkansas.
So can we go back and talk about that first execution? And you cover this in your book. Again, it's Watch Me Die, Last Words from Death Row. I believe you can purchase it on Amazon, Barnes Noble, I assume, as
Yeah,
well.
Blue Press, Barnes Noble,
Okay.
Amazon, yes.
Or do you have a Kindle version?
Yeah, yeah, they have all of it out there, I believe.
Okay. Typical Wild Blue stuff. Okay. So Watch Me Die. Again, get it on Amazon. Can you just walk us through that first encounter as far as, you know, the whole process? You meet the guy. Do you have the last meal with him? Is there a
I
relationship that's built between you and him?
So I've had last meals with others, not the first one. So the first one,
Do you mind giving his name?
Chris Newton.
Okay.
Yes. So Chris Newton, he just wanted to be executed. He would be what we would consider in this day and age a volunteer. He gave up all rights to appeals, did not want anybody to file any appeals for him. Killed his cellmate in protective custody one day. Drank his blood, masturbated all over him. He was just a very evil individual. He went to trial on that, and in place of a jury, chose to have a bench trial. So if it's a capital murder case, then you have to be tried in front of three judges. He went in front of three judges, had the trial. They found him guilty, and he said, "Listen, here's the deal. The first one's on me. I'm asking you to execute me. If you don't, I'm going to continue to do this, and the rest of the blood's on your hands." So they said, okay. So 5 years later is when his execution approached. When I met him, it was already that fifth year. So I spent, I would say very little time with this individual before the execution actually took place. But I got to know him quite well, because when I would go and interview them, there's no handcuffs, there's no shackles, we get to eat, we get to drink, we get to do whatever. And he was just as open and honest with me as he could be. And next thing I know, 30 days before the execution, they'll put them on the suicide watch, because the states will make sure that nothing happens to you until they put you to death, when it comes time when the execution warrant is signed.
That just
Then
seems so odd when you think
it's
about that.
it's
Like,
very
we don't
odd.
want you to die by your own hands. We want to be the ones to kill you.
Absolutely. So they will do anything and everything to make sure that you are alive in order to be executed. Um, and then usually 3 days, 2 days before the execution takes place, they will transfer them down to the death house in Ohio, is in Lucasville, which is on the border of Kentucky. So it's about 3 hours away from Mansfield, Mancy. Um, there, they're put in a cell that, the only thing I can describe it as is almost like a Hannibal Lecter type of cage, completely open. There's three guards in front of it, 24/7, where they are recording every move that inmate makes. So if he brushes his teeth, if he eats, uses the bathroom, whatever, they're recording that. They're marking that down, and there's somebody over to the side that's dictating every move that they make. Um, And then the execution, that's the death cell, then the death chamber is right next to it, so they have to actually walk to the death chamber, and hop up on the bed. And since there are no physicians or nurses involved in an execution process and in a medical execution process, and they're just prison EMTs. The first one that I witnessed with Newton, it took over 2 hours because they couldn't find his veins. They were sticking needles in his neck, in his arms, his legs, everything. Ohio calls for 2 ports of entry. So once they did get the one in the one arm opened up, they were running a bag of saline solution through it. That bag actually emptied while they were still trying to find the other veins. He had to use the restroom. He told him, "Hey, I gotta take a leak." And they're like, "Okay." So they let him get up off the table. He went, used the bathroom, came back, got back on the table, and strapped him back down again. Again, none of
What's
this
the
is.
demeanor of him during that time? Because, it's like, and what's the demeanor of these detention officers that are working it? Are they nervous? Are they, because surely they know that, okay, we're about to execute someone, and regardless of how you feel about that or how deserving he is to be executed, or even if he voluntarily wants to die, there's still got to be some nerves involved in sticking a needle in someone that that you're about to kill.
So I will say that I was laser focused on every movement of every individual in that chamber during the execution, and you could see the guards' hands shaking as they were trying to connect the catheter to the IV, and things like that. I mean, it was, yes, they're very. I think they're second guessing themselves at the time. Again, you'll never see the physician that is there to pronounce the body dead, or in case that physician needs to intervene, because there is a phone on the wall. So if the governor or the Supreme Court or anybody calls, or something happens during the execution and they need to intervene, that physician's there, but that curtain will always close. So you never see the physician, you never see the executioner, but everything else you see, and it's right there in front of you, just mere feet, a couple feet away. And it's I will say that those guards were very fortunate that Newton wanted to die, because he stayed in good spirits the entire time. Where I can't imagine somebody who was fighting against being executed, how he would have or she would have handled it at that time, because it took so long. But the entire time you could hear a pin drop in the witness seats, because it's so dead quiet inside of the execution or the death house, because you have 3 people sitting in chairs, regular chairs, a partition, and then 3 other people for the state side, and then behind you are the reporters that they have permitted to come in, that only have pencil and paper, or notepads and pens, so you can literally hear the writing on the notepads. And what they're doing is they're basically witnessing you witness the execution, because they're writing down every emotion that you exhibit. That's why I just stare straight ahead. I don't I don't make any motions to the inmate. I don't speak. I don't do anything, because I don't want that reporter or those reporters behind me writing down anything, making stuff up that I did.
What are your thoughts during that first execution, during those 2 hours of waiting? How did
You
that
know,
affect you personally?
the first one is no different than the second one, no different than third. It's like almost like time stops. It's a very surreal feeling. The fact of the matter is, regardless of what your opinion is on the death penalty, and again, I don't really offer an opinion in my book one way or the other. My only goal for the book was to give people full transparency of A, what death row is like, and B, what the death process is like, and for them to make an educated decision on what their opinion is after they've read it, firsthand. None of this stuff is made up. Obviously, it's stuff that I have witnessed firsthand. So I don't try to sway anybody one way or the other. Um, but I will say that when you're sitting there watching another human being um, who moments before you may have been joking with on the other side, while they were in the death cell, and this person isn't suffering. It's not like hospice. You're not waiting for them to expire. They are a live, functioning human being that are strapped down to a table for a state sanctioned murder that is governed by the laws of that state at the time. And you're there to watch the last breath leave their body. It's surreal.
So after that first one, do you take some time off? Like, how do you process that?
So it's a 4 hour drive from the death house to my home at the time in Ohio. And I would shut my phone off because for some reason, everybody, I guess I shouldn't say for some reason, everybody has a morbid curiosity of it. Family and friends, they want to know that you're okay and how to go and stuff like that. Plus, reporters and media, somehow they always get your phone number and they're calling because they want a quote. I never answer the phone. For 4 hours, I just listen to my music on the way home. I'm an 80s metal kind of guy, so I crank it up. I just head home. I process it that way. And, I try not to go out um, in public for a day or two because, word travels that you've witnessed an execution, and then everybody wants to know. And I don't blame people for wanting to know. It's just that's my way of internalizing it at first. I have my wife, my kids, my son and daughter, and we'll discuss it. But yeah, I just try to. I'll close that file up. That person's done. They're gone, and then I move on to the next segment of whatever is taking place.
So, did you decide to write the book right after that first execution? Was this something planned? Again, the book is Watch Me Die.
No, so I had witnessed three of them, and when you're teaching at the university level, they kind of want you to publish, and uh, they were very supportive of me going to death row, doing the interviews, and everything else. Um, but I knew I had to write something, and I didn't want to write a textbook like I had in the past with sociology and psychology. I wanted to write something that anybody could read. So it's a very easy read, in my opinion.
It
I don't,
is.
yeah, I don't get technical. I don't, use terminology that you have to have an advanced degree to read or anything like it. Anybody can read it. Anybody. Um, and I, I took about 6 months in Sandusky where, while I worked, I just made myself like 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I would write. Um, or go over my notes and just scatter. I had an apartment that friends of ours had right on the lake. They just said use it for your office. So I did that. I scattered everything around. Some days I'd go down there and just stare at the water because I didn't know what to, that writer's block. And
Right.
then it all came together. I handwrite everything. So I don't type because if I'm typing, I lose my train of thought. So I handwrite everything. Then I have to have it transcribed where I used Dragon Dictation and had that, and I submitted it to the publishers. And yeah, it's been kind of crazy.
So, the second execution, how did you make contact with that person and what was their name?
I think that one may have been Frank Spizak. Um, Very interesting case study. He At that point they started reaching out to me, and Frank Spizak was an individual who wanted to be known as the next head of the Aryan Nation Brotherhood. He was about the same height as Adolf Hitler, had the mustache of Hitler, hated everybody that was not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So if you were black, Hispanic, gay, whatever, he hated you, wanted you dead. Went into Cleveland State University at the times like 28 years prior to. He was on death row for that long, and shot a bunch of minorities and killed a few. Sentenced to death. 28 years later, the Supreme Court ruled, okay, it's time to put him to death. And over the past couple of years, when I was talking to him, It was only through correspondence. He was not even allowed to have visitors face to face because he wouldn't adhere to the rules on death row. That and the fact that he had this huge transformation from being Frank Spizak, the hater of everybody that was not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, changed his name to Francis Ann, wanted to have a sex reassignment surgery, had a an African American minister, and would have sex with guys on death row, gay sex all the time. So a complete 180. And he would describe this process to me in letter form. So Frank was, or Francis, however you want to address him, was unique in the sense that the first time I met him was the last time I met him, if that makes sense. So the very first time I met Frank Spizak, it was in the death cell. I spent maybe 30, 45 minutes with him face to face. And then I watched him get executed. So
What's that conversation like?
So it was a horrible conversation to really want to have because, again, when I'm in the death cell with these guys on the outside, there are three guards dictating every single word that is being spoken, every single action being taken. So I try not to say a whole lot. He wanted to know if I felt that he should be executed based on getting to know him and wanted me to diagnose him. And I explained to him, listen, I apologize, but it takes a whole lot longer. It doesn't work like it does on TV. I can't just speak to you through correspondence and then sit with you for a half hour and diagnose you with whatever it is you think you may suffer from. The fact of the matter is, you're scheduled to die here in a relatively short amount of time, and hopefully you have made peace with everything because it doesn't look like it's going to end well, when it comes to the actual carrying out of the execution. And he thanked me for that. I mean, he thought that I was very open and honest with him. He had some pictures laying in a death cell with him and his sister that he had not seen for about 30 years. And I asked him if I could have one of his pictures, just for my own, because at the time I wasn't writing the book yet. I said, just in case I ever need it in the future. He said, well, which one do you want? And I said, well, let's be honest, you're really not going to need them. So how about you just give them to me? And he gave them all to me. And at
So you're
that,
not sugarcoating anything. You're like, look, you've got
no,
30 minutes. You're about to get a needle in your arm and
yes. So
give me all your stuff.
these guys, believe it or not, just the way I'm talking to you is the way I talk to them. I use a lot of humor. And that's what's kept me, I think, alive on death row. Because again, there's no guards around, there's no shackles or anything typically. And So they appreciate the fact that I humanize them. I don't talk down to them. I don't treat them any differently than I would my students. I don't judge them for any other crimes because they've never done anything bad to me. They've done some horrible things in society, but I'm not there to judge them. They've already been judged by their jury and their peers, and they went through the appeals process. So as we are sitting there, the guards come. Another guard comes up behind me, or maybe assistant warden, said, Frank, I got some bad news for you. The Supreme Court just denied your final stay. And they handed him, it was a Supreme Court order that came through over on the fax. And he looked at it and he's like, well, I guess yeah, it's time to go. He said, do you want this? I said, yeah, I'll take that too. So I took that final stay, and the guard tapped me on the shoulder and said, it's time to get prepared. So I said, go easy. I don't know what you say to these guys at the end because it's not something you rehearse. I felt that he was remorseful at the time. I'll be honest with you, because they're very, I don't want to say conniving, but that it is, they are, they can, they're always in control of something. And he said his goodbyes to me. I went over to the debriefing room until we're ready to be led over through the prison yard because the death house sits out in the middle of the prison yard, and the prison's locked down. people are hanging out, inmates are hanging out their windows. You could hear them yelling and screaming and everything else. You go in, they lead him out. They put the IVs in him and everything else. And the last statement, they're always allowed to read their final statement. He decided to read in German, and that just infuriated the witnesses on the other side. It's the first time I'd ever heard the witnesses uh, ever make any noise, let alone them. One of them I could hear him say, I'd come through the window killing myself. Let me at him and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, he was not remorseful at all.
That's really interesting. So after that second one, are you lining up the third? And are you starting to build kind of a reputation within the death row community, if you want to call it that, of like this guy that they can reach out to and he'll be fair and
Yes.
kind of listen
So
to?
it's bizarre because it's not something that really looks good on a resume. Is
Right.
where you put down like I'm a stand up guy on death row, but literally those are the letters I would get, and these guys would say, hey, we hear you're a stand up guy. Would you like to talk to me or talk to me or talk to me? So I did. I started talking to more and more of them and making more trips to death row. And in Ohio, we've had several death rows in Ohio. They would move them around. So started in Lucasville, went to Mancy, then the Supermax in Youngstown, then down to Chillicothe, and now in Ross. That's all just in Ohio. So I was making a lot of trips to death row, talking to a lot of different inmates, and there was a lengthy period of time in Ohio where no one was executed. So then that backlog started catching up. And then I started getting requests. And then, then Fred Treesh was the third one that I had witnessed. Um, I had last meal with him on death row in Mancy before they transferred him. And we ordered like $80 worth of Italian food. They delivered it right to death row.
You talked about that in the book, and I thought that was a really interesting story for a few reasons because his dad was there as well, right?
Yeah, heartbreaking because he
Can you
reminded me
talk
of my
about
own.
that?
Yeah, so they're allowed for their last visit 8 hours on death row with two people, whomever they choose, and he chose myself and his father. Um, his father is like my dad's age, in his 80s. At the time, he was probably late 70s, a frail uh, older gentleman, but the nicest individual ever. And I remember him and I speaking outside the presence of Fred, uh, and him just asking me, where did I go wrong? I have two other kids; they're great kids; they never did anything wrong. And then here's my boy that I haven't seen in years, and they're gonna kill him in a couple days. And it was just that one was pretty gut wrenching. To explain to the father that you didn't do anything wrong. People make decisions in life, and unfortunately, Fred made some really horrible decisions that led to this ending of this chapter. But by no means did you or your wife do anything wrong. It was Fred's decision to kill and shoot at cops and everything else. So I mean, it was pretty gut wrenching. And the father was not going to be there for the execution. That was the last time he was ever going to see him as well. He was living out of state, and he did not want to see his son get executed, as most family members would not. So it was not one I'd wish on anyone.
I was going to ask, is that something that family members will actually attend?
Very few. Um, they the inmates themselves typically never want a family member there. That's not how they want to see them go. Um, and that's if they have any family left that haven't disowned them. Uh, depending on the crimes that they've committed or the family relationships, if those bridges aren't burned completely down. So
That's really interesting. So at some point you start to get this reputation and inmates start to send you art and you start to kind of develop a collection of sorts.
Yes.
That's kind of one of the questions I always asked was, okay, if you're on death row, you know what you're going to die, but you're on death row for several years. Like, what do you do with your time? And it seems like art is kind of a passion of a lot of these guys.
So, uh, passion is one word you could use, but it's also a way for them to make and generate a lot of money. So, again, when I first started on this death row experience, I was under the impression that death row inmates were locked up 23 hours a day, pump sunlight into them, for 1 hour. They get to be put in a dog cage or something like that, walk around, whatever, just like you see on TV or the movies. I had no idea that death row was so free and so clean and so quiet, and everybody gets along with everybody. It was mind blowing that I could go to death row and walk down the halls of death row until I found my inmate, or sit in commissary and eat as much as you want out of the canteen, and drink tons of diet coke. I drink diet coke, Mountain Dews, whatever they want. Frozen pizzas. Like down here in Florida, you get ice cream, everything else. I mean, on Ohio's death row, it's one on one. But I would line up visits. I would see this one for 4 hours, take a break, bring another one in for 4 hours, and then be done for the day. Florida, there's 25 death row inmates in one room at any given time, free to move around. You play games, get your pictures taken, you do whatever. It's just people do not understand that inmates on death rows have a lot of free time, and they have access to a lot of different um, outside entities. So I have email servers, that depending on the state that they're in, whether it's JPay, Securus, Getting Out, or whatever, I have emails every day. They call on my phone all the time. They write all the time. Plus, you can visit them, face to face. And their artwork on the outside, they'll make a lot of money. They'll find certain people that they'll either use as a broker, meaning that they will only send that individual their artwork. That individual sells it on a website, and they send them a percentage of the profits. Or anybody that from the outside that wants to just buy their signature, their letters, their poems, their art, they'll write back to them, but it's going to cost you this much and this much. It's just
And
it's a
so
business.
then the person has to put money in their canteen, or like where does the money actually go?
Yeah, it'll go right down their books, so they can use it for TVs, tablets. They can buy different shoes. They can get food boxes sent to them. They can do whatever they want. They can send money to people. I've gotten checks from death row, from
Wow.
both federal death row and state death row, made right out to me from the Federal Bureau of Prisons or the State Bureau of Prisons. It's bizarre that how much of a business it is on death row.
So when you're just walking around the facility, you've got 25 guys that are, you know, convicted murderers or just kind of milling around together, and you're
Yes.
with them, and you don't have any guard or any type of security with you, right?
No, there's one guard in Florida, typically in the day room where we're at. But the guards are overworked. They'll work 18-hour shifts, and so a lot of them, if there's a guard on duty, I've seen them sound asleep. Uh, it's it takes a lot of trust, but a lot of respect as well. So when you have 25 inmates, with everybody has a visitor at the time, so there's say 50 people in there, all in one room, free to move around, free to do whatever you want, knowing that none of these guys have anything to lose because they're all going to die. Period. They're on death row. They're there for the worst of the worst. So whether it's somebody like Wade Wilson, it's a high profile, or I don't even know all the names down here because you see so many of them. But what they'll do is, like, if I have a guy that I'm going to visit on death row in Florida, I'll let him know. I'll send him an email, or I'll send him a letter or a call. Say, hey, I'll come up on such and such a date. Let everybody else know the ones that I talk to. So they'll get a hold of their people, have them schedule visits the same day, so then we can all network the entire time. So yeah, it's your head's always on a swivel. You don't ever want to get complacent. I probably OD on caffeine every time I go to death row because I want to be alert, awake, and just because you never know what to expect.
And you're a pretty big guy too, right?
I'm
Not that that has that much to do with it, but I mean, is
yeah.
there an intimidation factor? Are these guys being super nice to you? I know that you said
Uh,
that a lot of these guys want to control the situation.
yeah.
Are they trying to do that with you? Like, what's that experience like?
So, um, yes, to all of that. So they're very nice to me because I'm very respectful to them. But I've had them sit across from me, look me dead in the eye, and say, listen, the guards will let anybody in here. We decide if you get to go home for dinner or not. This is our house, our rules. And I agree with them. You're right. It is your house. So I give them all the respect. They give me all the respect back. I've never sold a single piece of art. I've never sold a letter. I have this very first letter I ever received, 20 years ago, stashed away somewhere. I have like over 3,000 pieces of art stored away. I've never made any money off of these guys, and that's what they really respect. That's why they send me so much stuff. Prison uniforms, their MP3 players or tablets, the all the time. You never know what to expect in the mail, and because they know that I'm going to probably publish it, I'm going to at least display it on social media of some sort. That will get them the recognition maybe that they want, so they can make money from other people. So yeah, there's a lot of respect back and forth. Plus, what people don't realize is that they know everything about me, just like they would know everything about you if they're going to communicate with you. They have access to everything on the outside. So when they ask you the most personal questions, are you married? Do you have any kids? Where's your wife work? Where's your kids go to school at? They already know the answers to every one of those questions. They're setting you up to see if you're honest enough to tell them the truth. That's why I never lie to any of them, and they know it.
So you talked about in the book about how one of the inmates started to send care packages to your kid, your son,
Yes.
and that got kind of awkward because obviously once he was put to death, the packages weren't coming in anymore.
Yeah. So that James Filiaggi, another one. It was one of those guys where again I used a lot of humor with. He was huge in cooking before he went to death row, and he liked his children, his kids, and that family disowned him. So he would send at the time my son was in grade school, so he'd send puzzles and certain games for him to do, and even chewing gum and all that in the mail. I would never let my kid play with this stuff, but I'd show it to him whenever he came in, and then I'd file it away. And again, I've always dealt with adults, never children when it comes to psychology. And his execution comes, and I see him the day before everything. We say our goodbyes. I joke with him about. He's like, "Hey, did your wife ever try any of those recipes or anything I sent home?" I'm like, "Dude, remember I told you she could never really cook. In fact, I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you. I'll take the needle. You take her cooking. We'll meet up on the other side and we'll compare notes because that's what's going to happen." And he laughed and joked about it. Next thing you know, execution time, boom, done, file closed. A few weeks later, my son says, "Hey, I haven't got anything from Jimmy lately." I'm like, "Jimmy? Who's Jimmy?" He's like, "Your buddy down in Mansfield." I'm like, "Oh, no, he's dead. They just executed him." And he was like torn up about it because he was only like maybe I don't know 7 or so, and wifey's like, "God, you're the doctor. I can't believe you're such a jackass. You couldn't see this coming." So that taught me a really strong lesson.
Yeah, and it reminds me of cop humor about how you see so many dead bodies that you start laughing at everything and everything becomes a joke. And it sounds like that's kind of the same with you, how you've got desensitized to this throughout the years where you can, I don't want to say have a relationship, but have these conversations and be able to build trust and share things with people that you know are about to die.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, it's not always a good feeling to have to be so desensitized to it all because first of all, when somebody reaches out to you on death row, um, you already know that they're there not for jaywalking or anything else. They're there for some pretty horrible crimes that always include murder. So it just the at, at some point it gets to be a body count. How many did you kill? How many did you kill? Is it even worth my time? And nobody should ever think that way because one human life is one too many. Let alone, with somebody like Samuel Little, who I used to interview all the time. He reached out to me, and he had killed, I think, 87 or 89. He's the most prolific serial killer,
Right.
and he was born and raised in the same town, Lorain, Ohio, that I taught in, and his best friends lived in Sandusky, Ohio, where I was born and raised. So he considered us homies and reached out to me. So I have, I think, a portrait of a victim that's never been found yet, as well as his. Um, so we got to know each other quite well just because of that connection. I usually try to find some kind of connection when they do reach out, even if it's the littlest thing. So there's another serial killer from Ashland, Ohio, and I was I spent 4 years at Ashland, University, graduated from there, and it's such a small town. So I actually, my dorm was close to his apartment. He had killed 5 people there and is on death row. So we had that connection. Little Samuel Little with the teaching and everything else, we had that connection. There's somehow, some way, I always make a connection, even in the littlest ways, to make them open up a little bit more. And I don't ask them about their crimes. I'm not one to if I sit down with somebody the first time, I may spend, the first few hours talking about the weather, politics, and everything else until they finally say, don't you want to know what I did? And then that's when I jokingly say, well, obviously you're here like everybody else, not for jaywalking. And um, sometimes the serial killers, especially, they'll want to brag a little bit at first and then be like, I'm pretty good at what I did. And I'm like, if you were that good, we wouldn't be sitting here talking. You'd still be out there doing it. So I'm pretty sure you sucked at it. And it just breaks the ice. And then the least amount of questions I ask them, the more they tell me.
Has law enforcement ever reached out to you to try to use you as a source to gain information? Because I know
Yes.
that a lot of the serial killers probably inflate their numbers, but at the same time, there's probably a lot that we really don't know their real number.
Correct. Um, and there has to be something for that inmate to divulge that information. So, for instance, Anthony Sowell, I think he was known as the Cleveland Strangler. Right? He had killed 11 women and lived with the bodies, kept the bodies in his house, buried them in his backyard, and everything else. Um, I was the first one to interview him face to face on death row after he was sent to death row. And the FBI asked me if I was going to be able, if they gave me questions to ask him because they believed that there were more victims out there. I said that I would try. I didn't think he would offer me any information because he's so new to death row. He had just gotten on death row, so there's no reason for him to divulge any extra information. Um, and it just so happened that over the years he never really did. There was another guy that did divulge information to me, and I do have maps to those bodies. I've met with the FBI. They have gave me other questions to ask him. They verified it. They believe the maps are good. They just don't want to waste their resources because all of them are prostitutes. So we're in the process of working on that project right now. I have one of my really good friends out of Georgia who's an agent in the filming crew out of New York, and we have the cadaver dogs, we have everything. So we've narrowed down that search, and we're still in the process of those, and it's looking promising for us. But it's amazing how little law enforcement wants to get involved, because there's just too many egos. That's my biggest pet peeve with law enforcement is the egos that are out there. They want to either have jurisdiction over it all, they want to be able to claim it, or they don't want anything to do with it. And I will say that I just spoke at a forensic conference in South Carolina, and there's a serial killer up there, and law enforcement came down to listen to me speak on that, and they're very interested, but they're also very willing to assist in any way, to just to close some cases out there that they know that are outstanding, that they believe that this serial killer um, is attached to those bodies, and, and I think he is too. It's just going to take some time for him to relinquish that information to me, and it's a slow process. It's, this isn't the kind of a field to get into and say, I'm going to try to solve this case in a week or a month. Some of these guys I've dealt with for 15 years now, and it's taken that long to gain their trust. So
Yeah, I thought that I was going through your Instagram and pulling some pictures of some of the stuff that people have sent you, and I noticed this one on there. It says prison Easter bunnies are a little different, and it says I've seen things, man, bad things. And for those that are listening, it's a deranged Easter bunny with a heart tattoo on his arm and a swastika on his belly. Who drew this? And
so so if you see on my Instagram, and I do encourage people to follow it, not because I want followers, obviously, but because they'll see pieces of art from all different types of killers, and I never put their name on the post because I don't want to glorify them and I don't want to glamorize it or anything along those lines. There's also a lot of people out there that like to, what I consider, poach the guys that you're talking to get that art because it's worth so much. And I always tell people, if they just DM me, follow me, and then DM me, ask me who did this, I'll tell them. I just don't like to advertise it. But that one there, believe it or not, is from Scott Peterson, because I talk to him about every 2 weeks. And he's no longer on death row. He was on San Quentin's death row. He's in the process of his appeals now. But I've spoken to Scott. He reached out to me many, many years ago, and we connected, and I talked to him about every 2 weeks. And I think I'm about the only one that has his art or anything.
that's amazing. Not that he's a good artist, but
No, he is
he's
not.
not. But I mean, that's a very well-known case, and you're probably one of the few people that have actually sat down with him and had conversation. What's he like?
Um, Man, yeah. So this is going to sound horrible, and I don't want your listeners or viewers to take it the wrong way, but he's probably one of my favorite ones to speak to and talk to because um, he is very educated. He comes from a very well um, educated family, money, everything. He's not your typical death row inmate. And he's able to carry on conversations, and he's able to uh, utilize that sense of humor, and our banter back and forth is very, very humorous. And at the same token, he will open up on certain aspects of the case and everything. I've never spoken about it. I've never went to the media on anything. I've never sold any of his. I mean, I'm surprised I haven't gotten subpoenaed just from my letters that I've received from him and everything else that he's told me. But
Is
he's
he
in
just
the
talking about daily life, or like what's the conversation about? Y'all talking
everything.
about
So like,
sports or
mm, so I think his recent incident that made the news was when he got beat up in pickleball, and you know. An inmate they thought jumped him and everything else, and it turned out that he freely admitted, he's like, I learned a lot. I learned that you shouldn't chase after the pickleball with a racket in your hand in the middle of a prison yard. and other inmates are around because they think, oh my God, he's coming after me. So they got in a squabble on that and a fight on that, but they made up. He teaches different classes in the prison. The guy's now in that class. But yeah, we've talked about uh, family, his family, all of them in the family. Uh, when his mother died, when his father just passed away, it's just everything. I mean, um, I probably know more about Scott Peterson's personal life than anybody outside of his family, or his, probably his attorneys and family than me.
So you've got pictures like that, and then you've also got, we'll call this ketchup, but is that
That's
like
human blood. It's a scrotum. Uh, so that's the other thing that other inmates will try to do is I don't want to say try to
someone
do.
mailed this to you, right?
Yes. So I get a lot of art made out of blood, and there's a couple of them that will do it with human semen as well.
Is there any warning label on this? Or did you just
So they
hope
have to
you can
hide
get
that
the
in
gloves on?
between. Yeah, so they have to hide anything like that in between other paintings. Now they can send me the craziest thing. So I actually have um, crime scene photos, not copies, but the original ones from another killer, where they have taped to the back of paintings and sent me. And the reason that they were able to get a hold of them is they'll fire their attorneys, represent themselves, and then as the appeal process goes forward, they'll request the discovery. So they get the discovery, and then they'll send it to me. Totally, against the prison rules, just like anything with bodily fluids is and everything else. But they always find a way to smuggle it out to me. And again, there's a lot of thought process that goes into dealing with these individuals. So a lot of the paintings that you see on there may resemble like the Bob Ross style paintings or religious undertones and things like that. And those are the ones, the inmates that they want the general public to think that they have been rehabilitated, they changed. Yeah, that guy there killed 50 people. Um, so what they'll do is they want people to look at that and say, "Oh my God, they're a great artist," and that's all oil on canvas or acrylic on canvas, things like that. So what you end up having to do is say, "Okay, I'm tired of the Bob Ross stuff. Um, I want you, if you're going to send me any art, I want you to send me the art that's what's going through your mind." Because you're not fooling me with that. You're fooling the general public into thinking that you've changed, but I want to know what's really going in your mind, going through your mind, because I'm interested in the criminal thinking aspects of every one of these individuals. I'm not there to coddle them. I'm not there to advocate for them or anything like that. I want to learn from them, and the only way I can do that is if you are open and honest with me, even through your artwork. So that's when you'll get the dark art that they don't really like to send out or publish a whole lot of, because that shows the true them, uh, what's going through their mind.
So the Bob Ross photo that he was talking about is a scene in the mountains. It's, it looks like something that someone may actually purchase. And but then you've got other ones that you were talking about that is, was this made with blood as well?
No, it's
Okay,
that's
so it's
my
a red fist that's on a cell, and
yes.
it's done with some type of oil paint, but it looks kind of dark. Um,
I will say that even though I've gotten a lot of comments on that one, believe it or not, because people like that one. I do not. Again, that's one of the latest ones from Scott. Uh, he paints and draws very few, but when he does, he has a lot of meaning behind it. Uh, and some interpret that as maybe blood on his hands holding on to the jail cell or the prison cell. Um, you know, I, 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 I've never studied art, so Um, I leave that up to the art experts. I'll take a picture of it like I did and then toss it in the room. Wifey knows how to file them all away because she gets ticked at me when they start mounding up and piling up. So she can look at every painting, every letter, everything, and say, oh, this is so and so, this is so and so. And she has portfolios and cases and places for them, and she files them away. Otherwise, they lay on top of the bed in the kids' bedroom, the spare bedroom. They're grown now, but it'll pile up in there forever until she puts it away. So she tries to keep it all organized.
And you've even got some birthday cards sent to you.
Yeah, that's one that I'm going to witness his execution this year in Arkansas.
And this looks like it was done with a like crayon or something or pencil.
Yes.
But for those that are listening, it says "Happy U Day," and I mean it's got colorful balloons. It seems very childlike. Is that you talked about their personality coming out? I mean, you do have some darker things. Um, like another good example, so we've got a eye with a skull coming out of the teardrop. Is that kind of a part of your process now of you're watching these people die, you're trying to figure out what's going through their head, and are you documenting all this besides just storing away the paintings, or is there another book, or are you using these to teach? I guess
So
kind of like what's the end goal of all this?
um, my end goal, believe it or not, is once the filming and everything is done and we are able to hopefully bring some closure to some families. Um, there'll probably be another book or so in there. I just haven't had time to sit down and write. Um, I'd like to get the filming out of the way. And then at the end of the day, I just want to walk away from it all, whether I just sell everything and never look back, or people want you to open up galleries and museums. I mean, there are gallery style paintings and photographs and everything that these guys have made that I'm certain people would love. I could make really good money from it if I sold it. But if I sold anything right now, that damages my reputation on death row. It interferes with my safety on death row because, again, these guys know that I don't sell them out. And it also keeps me from being suspended from going into the institutions because I've made money from them. Some of them have that some of Son of Sam laws and things like that. So right now, it's just all stored away. Um, at some point, I'll probably write more about it, but I've displayed some teaching wise, or when I've gone to different speaking events. When people have asked me, I'll bring some stuff along. But man, it's just there. I have a ton of it. I mean, a ton of it.
So let's go through some of these real quick because I
Sure.
do find it interesting, and I'm torn because I don't want to give any type of notoriety to someone that's on death row. But at the same time, it really is one of those things that's just so fascinating that you're having these conversations and you're receiving these these drawings or paintings from them. And I really could see of how, again, Scott Peterson does this painting for you. What would be kind of a price range for something like that? Because that's not something that I'm really familiar with.
Right. So there are websites out there. The yeah, and different people have, I consider, different authorities on certain individuals. So, like, if you're talking like Keith Jesperson, like the Happy Face Killer,
Right.
that he's big. So, my friends Jen and Scott, they have sex love serial killer podcast. They have their own gallery where Jesperson actually introduced the two of them together. They each had their own separate podcast. He introduced them, and they've been together ever since, getting married. So, I mean, they've been together forever. They receive all of his artwork, and then they distribute it or sell it or whatever like that. I was fortunate enough to they gave me one because they were coming into town and they wanted to gift one to me. Uh, I thanked Jesperson for that, um, because I wanted to see if he wanted to communicate. At one time, he had wanted to, and I never wrote back, out of respect for those guys, because I don't like to poach people or anything like that. Plus, people already knew about him. There really wasn't a whole lot to learn about. When he found out I got a piece of his artwork and he didn't get any money for it, he was really ticked. He does not like me. Same with Dennis Rader, BTK. I spoke to him for a lengthy period of time, but we had code names that he had issued, and I one day posted a drawing or a painting of his, and for some reason I don't even know what I was thinking. I must have put BTK underneath it, and he had found out, because they always find out everything on social media and on the outside, that I didn't call him by our code name. So he put me in what he called Carbon Freeze, because he's a big Star Wars fan and wouldn't talk to me anymore for a while. So, I mean, it's really bizarre. Jordan Cook is another authority figure on John Wayne Gacy. So if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to buy a Gacy," which I don't buy art anyways, but would you be interested in this Gacy? Before I would ever even look at that, at purchasing something like that, I would give somebody like Jordan Cook a call and say, "Hey, take a look at this," because he's got the ledger of every single painting. I think he owns 40 of them himself. I'm friends with his attorney, Karen Conti. So it's about networking, but
So
also the
this is a big
supply.
business.
Yeah, it's a huge. So a Gacy's going to go for $5,000-6,000 right off the bat, easily, easily.
And what does Gacy get a is there a like a cut that the
No, these are all
person gets?
private. No, these are all private individuals. He's been dead for a while now, so once they are executed, the value goes up. So it's a supply and demand thing. So he has hundreds of paintings out there, but that's very few when you think about the totality of it all, and knowing that there's never going to be another one. So, you know, I think maybe the cheapest Gacy I've come across would be between $5,000 and $6,000, and the prices go up from there. Now, when you're talking about somebody like Scott Peterson or something like that, you can't really price them because I'm the only one that owns them. So whatever price I set, people would pay, and I've had people ask me to purchase them all the time. Somebody wanted to trade me a Manson painting for one of Peterson's, because there's more Mansons out there than there are Petersons. I'm certain I can make some deals with a Gacy painting on a Peterson, but that's just not something I do. I'm not. I'm not into the murderabilia, selling or anything like that. But there are people, again, if there's a just person out there and somebody wants to know what it's worth, you get a hold of Scott or Jen. If it's a Gacy, you get a hold of Jordan. There are people like that really are authorities, because that's what they do. They have museums, they have their own websites and things like that. So they're really good at the art of pricing different pieces of art and letters, because people will buy a signature. They'll buy a Peterson signature, an Ng signature. I have tons of Charles Ng and Leonard Lake stuff, because Charles Ng and I have spoken for many years. So I have his origami, I have his paintings and all that, and they're typically difficult to come by. But again, I just the Samuel Little art, the BTK art, all that. It's piled up. So
With BTK, and he's one that I find really interesting, especially if we were talking earlier of how there may be other victims, and I know there's some like word searches that people are still trying to decipher with him. Did
yeah.
you have any conversations with him about that, like the other victims, or?
He was very arrogant, very uh, obsessive compulsive. So when we would correspond, he would weigh every single sheet of paper, mark that weight down right on the inside of the envelope, right on every side, every corner of the paper. I mean, he would write in different type of codes. So I'm certain if I took the time to try to get somebody to help me decipher it all, but again, I don't like to give these individuals that much of my time. I tell them flat out, it, I don't work in that realm of guessing. Either you're going to tell me or you're not, and I don't care one way or the other. But if you want to talk to me, we're going to communicate like normal human beings. I'm not going to treat you like the serial killer that you want to be treated like. I'm going to treat you like the person that you are face to face with me, because I don't care what you think you've done in the past or what you're trying to hide. I'm not playing a guessing game. You're either going to tell me or you're not, but I'm not going to beg you, and I'm certainly not going to pay for this information, and I'm not going to play these games. I have more important things to do. And then they'll open up more. But Raider was not one to offer a whole lot to me, because there were so many people out there that wanted to give him that notoriety, and I just wouldn't.
So were you able to speak with him in person, or was this all through letter writing?
That was all through letter. Before I got to see him in person is when I must have posted something, and it was I think it was on Facebook at the time, and somebody caught wind of it and told him about it, and he didn't like the fact that I didn't use his code name, so he stopped talking to me, and I never reached back out. I wasn't one to say sorry or anything like that. It just is what it is.
Yeah, I really like and respect your approach of you don't treat them like celebrities, or
No.
you really do a good job of keeping that in perspective. And I especially like the very direct tone that you have with them. That's respectful, but and very effective, because
It,
law
it,
enforcement, I
it,
feel
it,
like, would not have that approach.
well, and see, they don't like law enforcement, and that's again, it's the ego aspect of it. My belief is law enforcement should be reaching out more to podcasters like yourself. The Also the true crime. Um, I don't want to say fanatics, but the ones that are very vested and are so absorbed into true crime that they can really look between the lines, because law enforcement, much like myself when I first started, have tunnel vision, and they just want to focus on the straight and narrow, point A, point B, and everything else. And the podcasters that are out there, without the ones that try to act like attorneys or reserve judgment. I see certain podcasters like with the Karen Reed trial, and they're saying, "Oh my God, there's no way she did it. This, and this." And I never go against the court system. When the jury speaks, the jury speaks, because I'm smart enough to know that I've worked in the courts all my life, that whatever the media shows you is just a snippet of it. You don't have all the evidence. So the ones that do those deep dives into, like the Indiana, the bridge killer, and things of that nature, I think those individuals out there that run those podcasts could be very beneficial to law enforcement, if law enforcement would keep an open mind to what they're trying to say. And if law enforcement is willing to work with individuals like that, with like myself, if they wanted to. Now, I will say that when the FBI asked about contracting with them to go into prison, at first I was, ecstatic and all, like, absolutely. Why wouldn't I do that? That's great. And then I realized that whatever those inmates would send me would no longer be my personal property. It would be, them, and
Right.
I couldn't do that. Um, so, but that being said, I never, I never keep anything from law enforcement, meaning that, we have FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, on standby for when we get to the point up in Jacksonville to make the discoveries that we are working on right now. I don't try to hide anything like the ones from South Carolina. If this serial killer gives me a name of a victim or a county that they think is involved, I will contact them instantly. It's not like it's hush hush. I would help out any way I can because the ultimate goal is obviously to bring some closure to some families. And I'm not about the ego aspect of it. I don't care who takes the credit for it or anything like that. I just know that once we dig for the victims that I have maps to, and I have different serial killers with different maps. The first human remain that's found, I'm done. It's over. It's at that point you contact law enforcement because that's no longer something that we're just searching for. It becomes a crime scene at that point, and then you back away and you hope that giving them the respect of listen, we've been open and transparent with you the entire time. Let us continue, with the filming aspect of it or wherever we can, and hopefully they will. But ultimately, it's law enforcement's it's call their call, and I'll respect anything they say. So
Well, that's very good of you, and that's a good way to look at it, using the skill that you've been able to develop over decades, to be able to do something to really help those victims. Because I think that probably is one of the misconceptions that people would have, is that this book is pro serial killer or, in some way helps them, and it doesn't. They're not making a dime off this, and
mm-mm.
you're using that information to help those victims. So I really respect that. So let's get back to the book. We've got Watch Me Die, Last Words from Death Row. You can get it anywhere you can buy a book. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, it's on Kindle. Is there an Audible version of this?
Yes, there's Audible as well. Yeah, I mean, it's been received very well. I will have to say. It's just one of those things where it's more eye opening than anything because when people think they know what death row is like and what the process of execution is like, I think they'll be shocked to see that it's not what's portrayed on the media aspect of it. So, for instance, at some point you will see me interviewing some individuals on death row on TV whenever the series or documentary or whatever comes out. When you see that, they're going to be behind glass, they're going to be shackled and chained and everything else because they want that appearance to look like it's that safe and secure at all times. And the reality of it is, I've never been in front of them shackled and chained. We've always been able to move freely around, eat, drink, and everything else with the exception like San Quentin, where they lock you in the cell with that individual, but you can go out, get the food, bring it back into the cell and everything. But I mean, there is just there's a lot of freedom on death row.
Yeah, and that part was really shocking and eye opening when I was reading it. Is just, you described it perfectly, that most people's perception is that you're in the secure facility where nothing can happen to you. And there's several stories of you walking around and you're sitting right across from a guy that killed multiple people. I remember the story that you were talking about where, you go to the vending machine to buy a zero bar for the guy, I believe it was. And that was like, you gave him one to take with him, and I believe he stuck it in the front of his pants, and you asked him like, hey, are the guards going to find that? And they're like, no, they don't search us there. And
Yeah.
that just kind of amazed me that, okay, uh, I was in law enforcement for a long time, and that's an obvious spot that you would check,
You
is
would
right
think.
around the waistband.
I think I mentioned in the book as well because being you were in law enforcement before I ever became a professor. Then currently I work in forensics as a specialist therapist for the courts down here in Florida. But prior to that, I was a probation officer, chief probation officer. So we had to carry guns and handcuffs and everything else. So I always had a handcuff key on my key ring. And every prison I went into, death row in Ohio, execution wise, I always had that handcuff key right on my key ring. And that's like the Wonka ticket, really, if you think about it, because
Right.
if they knew I had that, who knows what they would have done.
You know, it surprised me, but it didn't. I had an author named Mark Pinsky on the show who interviewed Ted Bundy
Oh, okay.
in prison, and he described the same thing where his buddy kind of set it up, and his buddy told him to dress and act like you're a lawyer and carry a, small briefcase, and he basically just walked right in.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like,
I,
that's amazing. You would think that it would be this, Silence of the Lambs cell where the person isn't allowed to move, and you're strip searched before you go in, and you're walking around with a handcuff key.
listen, you can't make this stuff up. I'm telling you. One of the executions I went to in Ohio that I was a witness for, I always try. I get to the prison at like 5 in the morning. I try to get there a little bit before the protesters because they have them on both sides. State Patrol is always in charge of the perimeter and the security of it. So I pull up, and state trooper asked me, he said, you can't come here because it's closed off. I said, I'm here for the execution. I'm a witness for the execution. Oh, well then go on in. Just drive on back. And when I drove back, the next thing I look, I drove almost to the death house where the hearse was, and I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. So I turned around and went back, and I said, is there a different place I should be parking? I don't think I should be over there. He's like, yeah, just park wherever you want over here. And I'm like, I can't believe that it's that flippant, but it really was.
Yeah, I would picture like you went through 5 gates, and they had spike strips for your
Yeah.
car ready, and
Nope, nothing. The second or third execution, it was the same guard at the beginning of the prison to let us in, where you go through the metal detectors and all that. And they were bringing the press in because they have a media room set up outside of that, so they have to check their equipment and their film cameras and all that stuff. I come to walk in, and the same older guard, he's like, "Oh yeah, you're from Lake Erie, aren't you?" Because that's where I lived up on the lake. Any good fishing up there? I'm like, no, not this week. And he's like, just these guys are taking forever. Just go on back. Never searched, nothing.
what methods of execution have you witnessed?
So all of my executions have been lethal injection, but they've all been different lethal injections. The 3 drug cocktail, 2 drugs, 1 drug. The one coming up this year, I believe he has chosen gas, so it'll be nitrogen hypoxia. I was asked to attend an execution here in Florida by electrocution. The guy chose electrocution, but he just died about 3 weeks ago of natural causes, cancer, and he was only in his 50s. Um, South Carolina has put a couple to death already by firing squad. There's a couple more states that are looking to go that route. Um, and so, yeah, I'm curious to see how the nitrogen hypoxia is going to work when I go to that execution, because it's a different method. So I'll probably write something on that one as well, just because it's a different method. But I would say that if I had to choose any method to go, not that I would want to, but if I had to choose, it would be probably the firing squad. And again, even that's different in different states. So if you're looking at Utah as opposed to South Carolina, Utah, you're going to have 5 sharpshooters with a 30-30. 4 of them are going to have live rounds. One's going to have a blank. In South Carolina, there's 3 sharpshooters, all 3 live bullets with 308s.
Yeah, and the 308's a large bullet for
Sure.
those that are not aware of these type of things. So that's definitely not one that you're going to question whether it's going to kill the person or not. Is those seem like the most, if you're looking at from the humane aspect of it, something that is the least likely to mess up. Have you seen any executions that have, I wouldn't say did not get the end result, because obviously they died, but I guess the drugs or whatever did not take effect as quickly as you would think?
Yes. So the first one that took, a lengthy period of time, not only because of the veins and finding the port of entries, but also those out there that are listening, if you've had a surgery in the any time in your life, typically you're going to meet with an anesthesiologist. There's a lot of scientific questions they have to go through, the laws of physics, everything else, body weight, mass, height, everything like that. So they get those drugs correct. With an execution, they're just juicing you. They're everybody's getting the same amount. With the three drug cocktail, with the sodium pentothal, that would knock you out just like anybody else in surgery. The pancuronium bromide, which would paralyze you, it's a paralyzation agent that keeps you completely still. And then the third one's the potassium chloride, which gives you a coronary heart attack. And some of those drugs are fast acting. So the first one that I witnessed, the sodium pentothal knocked him out. The potassium, the second drug,
The paralytic.
yes, paralytic. Thank you. That wore off before the potassium chloride entered his heart. So you could see him convulsing, you could see him gasping and everything else, because the body's natural defense mechanisms kick in, and that their natural defense mechanisms say stay alive. So what people have to realize is that when they do these lethal injections or any of the methods like that, they try to make them appear to be humane only for the witnesses. It's not for the benefit of the condemned inmate being put to death. They don't want the general public to think that that person suffered, which is bizarre to me, because whether you're for or against the death penalty, the fact of the matter is, people need to know what is really going on and quit masking the symptoms. So when you're putting them out as with sodium pentothal and the pancuronium bromide, the paralyzation agent, only to make them suffer from a heart attack, and they are, by all intents purposes, from the physicians I've spoken to, suffering. They're having a coronary arrest, heart attack. You just can't see it because they're paralyzed and they can't move, but they know it's happening. And to me, that is it's just done under false pretense. Same with the nitrogen hypoxia, I'm assuming. But when you have something along the lines of the firing squad, that alleviates any medical professionals. So you have bullets, a hood over the head, a target over the heart, sharpshooters aiming at the heart, done. So there's no need for a physician or nurses or anybody like that to be a part of it. It is just an execution, in all intents purposes, done the way that I think most people would want an execution to take place, where it may get a little messy, but it's going to be effective. It's going to be over quickly.
Yeah, and you talked about hangings being an option and all the
Yes,
things that can go wrong with that if you don't get the math right with the person's body weight. And I think that you really have a good point on that, especially when we look at whether you're for the death penalty or against. The fact of the matter is, it's very hard to get those drugs in a lot of states for the lethal injection.
correct.
And like you're saying, that I completely agree. These are not medical experts that are doing this, and there's a lot of guesswork and a lot can go wrong, where you do have the option of a firing squad where the person does have training in sharpshooting and can have an actual qualification to make sure that they are proficient in that skill, as opposed to doing something that they're not accustomed to. You don't have to worry about an IV with a firing squad.
Correct. I mean, I had one guy on death row in Ohio. I wasn't present for it, but he was one of my guys. And, yeah, all of the drugs were used up. They never hit the veins. So they had to halt that execution because they ran out of drugs. And
So
that's
he
just,
was actually hooked up and
oh yeah, Romel Broom. Um, yeah, they ran out of drugs because none of that entered the veins. So he was alive the whole time. And tell him he could feel it. He could feel the burning and everything else. So they had to halt that one because they ran out of drugs. So then the question became, does he get rescheduled, or since this doesn't really happen, the Supreme Court, they appealed it to the Supreme Court, say, hey, listen, the state failed, so he shouldn't be executed at all. And the Supreme Court said no, he's supposed to die based on the laws of the state of Ohio, and they were supposed to reset it, and then he died from COVID anyways. So years later.
that's
So
really interesting.
it's just bizarre because of the fact that in 2025 we can't figure out our healthcare system, we can't figure out our educational system. Uh, we're at such a polarized divide when it comes to politics, and here we are trying to find a better method of killing somebody, and yet not every state has it. We have what, like 27 states now, I believe, that utilize the death penalty. The rest do not. So we can't even agree on a method of killing somebody. We can't even agree that either all 50 states do it or not. The federal government supersedes. So the federal government can if you are convicted of a capital murder case, say on federal property or during the commission of a federal crime in a state like New York or Michigan or something like that, they don't have the death penalty, but the federal government does, and they try you, then you're going to be put to death in Terre Haute, Indiana. But otherwise, if it's a state trial, you're not going to be put to death.
Have you been to any federal executions?
I was supposed to attend Lisa Montgomery's. She was the only female federal death row inmate at the time. There's still no one on there now. She was the first federal female inmate to be put to death in 70 years. She was one of mine. I talked to her all the time. Was asked to be at hers. It was during COVID, during Trump's last administration, and so they wouldn't let me in. Feds are very, very choosy on what they allow and what they don't allow. So I was not permitted to witness her execution, um, but they did end up executing her, and there's no females on federal death row inmates now. So I
Was
have
that
the
by
only,
lethal injection?
that was lethal injection. Yeah, that's the route of administration they use for executions, and they can only be done in Terre Haute, Indiana. Um, Indiana also has the death penalty. The state does, and they're one of only two states that they do not permit media inside at all. So, which is kind of odd.
That's interesting. So I know that you don't really take a stance on the death penalty in the book, but do you have is there anyone, first of all, that you're, I don't want to say looking forward to, but I will, looking forward to or really deserving of the death penalty? Or is this completely emotionless? You do not factor in what they did in their past?
Now, I reserve judgment on every single one of them because I'm just there to learn from them. If they want me there to watch them get executed, I'll do that. But no, I don't. I certainly don't look forward to any execution at all because even though people reach out to me all the time and they say, "Man, I'd love to be able to witness execution." I don't think they realize the emotional toll it takes on you when you're sitting there watching somebody, the life being snuffed out of them. Um, that being said, I'm not one to say that there are people out there that shouldn't be put to death either. I mean, there are some evil people in prison. Now, I don't have anybody that claims they're innocent. That was one of my stipulations when I started on death row is I'm not talking to anybody that says they're innocent. If you think you're innocent, then you need an attorney. You need to fight your case in the court of law, but I'm not here to advocate for you one way or the other. You have to admit your guilt to me before I speak to you. And I was shocked at how many of them did. Nobody's ever been remorseful at an execution, and nobody's ever denied it. So,
I'm sure this is probably hard to do, but is there any hierarchy as far as who was the worst in your opinion that you've interviewed and been face to face with?
oh man, um, yeah, like Samuel Little, he was Charles Ng. When you kidnap and keep sex slaves, and kill 25 people like Ng and Leonard Lake did. When the BT case, Gary Ridgway's, those they're the monsters that really do live amongst us. Um, but at the same time, they can be your next door neighbor. They can be your coworker. They are what I classify a good serial killer as dangerously normal. That they don't walk around with serial killer tattooed on their forehead. They blend in very well. They're very good at blending in. So, Samuel Little was not going to go into an all white neighborhood because he would stick out. You know,
Right.
yeah, a lot of the serial killers will choose drug addicted prostitutes or sex workers because they know people won't come looking for them if they go missing. Typically, we're seeing a huge um, uptick in the coverage of Rex Harriman with the Gilgo Beach killer. With all the sex workers that he killed as well. But look how many years that they sat on that evidence uh, prior to even coming to uh, arresting him, and he hasn't even went to trial yet.
Yeah, it definitely is a long process. And you're absolutely right as far as the prostitution workers being the targets of serial killers. We had BR Bates on she was actually my first guest. And I don't know if you're familiar with Eric Armstrong, who he's referred to as the baby doll serial killer from Detroit,
No,
Michigan.
no,
It,
I'm not familiar with him.
yeah. And also, oh man, she's going to hate me for this. Her book is Crack City Strangler is the other guy, but it's another guy that, he's target prostitutes and they really don't know the exact number with these. They found
Right,
multiple bodies, but like you're saying, it's very hard to get someone that's overworked already and dealing with, let's say you're dealing with 10 bodies, 10 different cases, and the amount of work that takes. And then you're supposed to track down more that he's not talking to you about. It's like you've already got him for 10.
right,
If you're getting him for a death penalty or life in prison, like,
yeah,
and
and
kind
I
of the same way with BTK, right? Where
yeah, and I
he's been
feel
open about that.
yeah,
Like,
I feel bad for law enforcement as well because they do take a bad rap. Because when by the time the media gets a hold of all the information and they'll put their Datelines or 2020 specials out and that, and then you look at that hour or 2 hour special and people are like, oh my god, law enforcement really screwed that up or they did this. They're so quick to blame them, but they don't realize that law enforcement officers out there are dealing with every aspect of society: mental illness, lost puppies, kids, juvenile crimes, adult crime, they have to handle every aspect of society. So I understand how certain things, I don't want to say get swept under the rug, they just don't connect the dots because of what's expected out of them. And in this day and age, especially with law enforcement, they have to watch their own back on top of it. And I just think they get a pretty bad rap when it comes to a lot of these serial killers and Monday night quarterbacking and everything else from the others out there saying they should have done this, this, and this, but they've never been in that position before. And I've spoken to a lot of different law enforcement officers when I speak at different places, and uh, I flat out tell them, listen, my job's easy. You guys have already caught them. When I deal with them, I don't have to worry about did this person do it or did they not do it. They're convicted. They've already done all the legwork. They've tracked them down. They've arrested them. Everything else. Now I just got to get inside their head to figure out why they did it and did they do other ones that they haven't solved yet. Is all. But there's a lot of finger pointing out there by a lot of individuals that have never uh, taken place in the field themselves, from the psychological aspect of it to the law enforcement aspect of it, from the attorney aspect from it, and so on. I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're completely right about I think that when you're not in law enforcement, sometimes people are able to open up to you more. I actually wrote a book with my brother called I'll give myself a plug, A Murder
Yeah.
on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. And the book is about a cold case in Asheville, North Carolina in 1973. Her name was Virginia Olson. And what was really interesting about that is when we started to search for other witnesses, we even talked with her boyfriend, that I found that a lot of those classmates and her boyfriend particularly were willing or more willing to reach out to my brother, who
Hmm.
is a university professor, than they were to me.
Sure. Right.
I had that connection with law enforcement, but and I think that's one of the reasons why we work so well together. But he was able to, people would email him directly and tell them things that the Asheville Police Department never knew. And, some of those things are put in our book. But I think that I'm really glad that you are using that to your advantage of being able to sit down with these serial killers and have them open up to you, and you're doing the right thing and passing that along. So I really appreciate that.
And thank you for that because again, it's a team effort. It's collaboration when you're allowed to. I don't know if you know John Stamp at all. Um, he author as well, really good, and also an agent. Um, he him and I, we bounce stuff off of each other all the time because um, when they open up to me, I get the information aspect of it, the psychological and maybe the confessions, but then I have to give it to somebody that has the resources to take it to the right people in the law enforcement arena. And because I don't want my guys on death row to think that I'm associated with law enforcement. Otherwise, they
Right.
clam up as well. So it's one of those things where you just have to, at some point, build a trusting relationship with somebody from law enforcement, just like law enforcement has to build that relationship up with somebody from the outside. And then you have to work together if the ultimate goal is the same, and that's to close some cases and bring some closure and some finality for it. So, and that's a fine line to walk.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, I think we can start to wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else you want to point out before we close out?
I just I appreciate being on your show. Number one, and number two, if people have questions, ask. Reach out to me. Come on my Instagram, my Facebook, or whatever. Feel free to ask me anything. I try. I'm pretty transparent. If everybody on death row can know about my life, then anybody else out there that wants to learn more about it is I'm willing to answer their questions as well. And start a dialogue. That's the only way that some closure is going to be able to be created for some of these families out there.
Well, go ahead and give us your Instagram handle. The book is, again, Watch Me Die, Last Words from Death Row. It's by Bill Kimberlin. And
Yeah.
where can we find you on social media?
So it's my regular name, Bill Kimberlin, on Facebook, and you'll see the cover of my book on there. The same with Instagram. I go by Walking Stick _69 because that's my birthday and my Native American name. But if they just put in Bill Kimberlin, look for the cover of my book, they'll know it's me because there's two Bill Kimberlins. We're kind of related, distant, but the other Bill Kimberlin is much more famous, and his best friends like Richard Branson and that's not me. So just look for the Watch Me Die thing, and you'll see all the artwork. It's not a private account, so anybody can see it. And friend request me, I'll follow them right back, and they can ask me anything they want.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. If you like the show, please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, please give us a follow and leave us a review. If you would like to support me, you can always buy my book, A Murder on Campus, The Professor to Cop in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. It's available anywhere you can buy a book. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book a Million. We've got a Kindle version, an Audible version. We've got it all. You can also follow me on Santana True Crime. If there's a case that you would like for us to cover, please DM me at Santana True Crime, and we will make sure we get to it. Dr. Bill, thank you very much. Hope
Thank
everyone
you.
has a good night.
Thank you.